The sun cast a warm, amber glow over the quiet suburban street as the sound of laughter echoed faintly from the nearby playground. It was one of those perfect late summer afternoons, warm, lazy, and full of promise. 7-year-old Lily Bennett clutched a vanilla ice cream cone with both hands, carefully licking around the edges to catch the melting drips. Her dark hair was tied in pigtails, and her yellow sundress swayed with each skip as she followed her dad out of the ice cream shop. The small family-owned parlor was a weekend favorite, just a short walk from home. Her father, David, was right behind her, chatting with the shop owner as he stepped out. Lily paused outside the door and turned to wave at the security camera above. It had become a little habit, smiling at the magic camera every time they visited. That grainy, cheerful wave would become the last image anyone had of her for 6 long years. David's phone buzzed just as they reached the parking lot. "It's work," he sighed. "Give me just 1 second, sweetheart." He stepped a few paces away toward the curb, his eyes locked on his phone screen as he answered. Lily continued walking slowly across the lot, still focused on her ice cream, unaware that her father was no longer within arm's reach. The next few minutes would fracture David's life forever. When he looked up again, barely a minute later, Lily was gone. He called her name casually at first, then with increasing urgency. "Lily, Lily." He ran between cars, checked around the corners of the shop, behind dumpsters, even back inside the store. Nothing. She had vanished. There were no screams, no sounds of a struggle. Just a cone dropped near the edge of the parking lot, half melted, abandoned like a forgotten toy. Within the hour, police had arrived. Tapes were pulled, customers questioned. Everyone watched the security footage over and over, Lily waving at the camera, walking toward the lot, and then, out of frame. Seconds later, a faded blue pickup truck backed out of a space nearby and turned down the road. There were no other clues. No license plate captured. No eyewitnesses who saw her get into the truck. She had simply disappeared in daylight, as if swallowed by the quiet street itself. For David, time froze in that parking lot. The single moment he glanced away became the line that separated before and after. And though the world kept spinning, his never did. The disappearance of Lily Bennett sent shockwaves through the peaceful suburban community. In a town where children played freely on sidewalks and neighbors knew each other by name, the thought of a 7-year-old vanishing in broad daylight seemed unthinkable. But within hours of her going missing, the full weight of reality began to settle in, and with it came the frantic search. Police officers swarmed the area, cordoning off the ice cream shop's parking lot and nearby streets. Yellow tape fluttered in the late afternoon breeze as investigators reviewed the surveillance footage on repeat. Over and over, they watched Lily's small figure skip out of the shop, waving cheerfully at the camera. The grainy footage showed her heading toward the edge of the lot, and then, nothing. Just a gap. Just gone. David stood nearby, pale and shaking, holding Lily's backpack like it might still contain some trace of her. He kept whispering to himself, "I looked away for 1 minute, just 1 minute." His wife, Emily, arrived not long after. The moment she saw David without Lily, her knees buckled. She had to be held upright as the horror set in. As news of Lily's disappearance broke, volunteers poured in. Strangers knocked on doors, handed out flyers, and posted her smiling photo on every lamppost, bulletin board, and car window. Search teams were organized. Helicopters flew overhead. Drones scanned nearby woods and creeks. People waded into thick brush with flashlights and dogs, calling her name into the night. "Lily, Lily, it's okay. You can come out." But the woods were silent. No footprints. No torn clothing. No signs of a struggle. Just the ice cream cone, dropped near the curb, half melted and already drawing ants. Investigators clung to the one potential clue, a faded blue pickup truck seen on a secondary camera across the street. The camera caught only a glimpse, just enough to tell it was older, maybe 90s model, and missing a front license plate. It had backed out of a spot moments after Lily disappeared and turned out of the lot slowly, almost unnoticeably. It didn't race away. It didn't look suspicious. But the timing was too precise to ignore. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, checking registration records for similar vehicles. They visited every nearby home with a blue truck parked in the driveway. Dead ends, every one of them. David spent his nights obsessing over that vehicle. He would sit at the kitchen table, playing the grainy clip again and again, noting every detail, the dented fender, the missing passenger mirror, the dull color. That truck became the shadow that followed him everywhere. In dreams, on highways, every time he saw a similar vehicle, he would swerve his car in pursuit, only to be met with disappointment and pity. Days turned into weeks. The media ran the story daily. Candlelight vigils were held. Her mother spoke at press conferences, voice cracking, pleading with whoever took her daughter to just bring her home. Rumors swirled. People saw the truck in other towns, or swore they heard a girl crying in abandoned buildings. Each tip gave hope. Each one broke their hearts all over again. And then, the calls stopped. The flyers faded. The vigils grew smaller. Life, cruelly, went on. But not for David. For him, time had stopped the moment Lily vanished, and he vowed, no matter how long it took, he would find her. Even if he had to chase that blue truck to the ends of the earth. The seasons changed, but for David Bennett, every day felt the same. Mornings bled into nights without meaning, each one haunted by a question with no answer: where is Lily? 6 years had passed since that summer afternoon when she vanished, but in his heart, time had stopped. The world kept moving, friends moved away, the news cycle shifted, even the ice cream shop eventually closed down, but David stayed frozen in the moment he looked up from his phone and didn't see his daughter. The investigation had long since gone cold. The blue pickup truck remained a phantom, uncaptured, untraced, almost mythical. Tips dried up. The missing posters peeled from walls. Her room at home remained untouched, preserved like a museum, her drawings still taped to the closet, her favorite stuffed giraffe sitting upright on the neatly made bed. Emily, Lily's mother, had tried to cope in her own way. Therapy, support groups, even writing letters to Lily in a private journal. But the weight of grief eventually pulled them apart. David and Emily separated 2 years after Lily's disappearance, unable to carry the pain together any longer. David, however, never stopped searching. He took a leave of absence from work that became permanent. His days were spent driving, sometimes aimlessly, sometimes following anonymous tips he found online. He joined missing persons forums, analyzed footage, taught himself how to trace truck models by year and factory recalls. His computer desktop was covered in folders labeled with names like Truck Sightings 2017 or Unconfirmed Leads Texas Route. He'd become a man obsessed, not with revenge, but with hope. Desperate, burning, unshakable hope. Once a week, he visited the local police station, just to ask if anyone had reopened Lily's case. The answer was always the same: "We're sorry, Mr. Bennett." Nothing new at this time. He kept a corkboard in his garage covered with pins and string, a chaotic web of maps, truck sightings, roadside reports, and sketches. Some people in town started calling him the map man, behind his back. A few thought he'd lost his mind. But none of that mattered to David. Because somewhere out there, he believed, Lily was still alive. He remembered her so vividly, the way she hummed while coloring, her habit of skipping every third step on the stairs, the way she clung to his arm during thunderstorms. He refused to accept that her voice had been silenced forever. Every time he passed a girl on the street with dark hair and a yellow dress, his heart skipped. He always looked, just in case. 6 years is a long time to hold on to a single moment. But David carried it like a flame in the dark. His beard had gone gray at the edges. His clothes hung looser now. He slept very little and spoke even less. But every time he thought about giving up, he imagined her voice, soft and clear, whispering, "Don't stop looking, Daddy." And so, he didn't. Not even when it felt hopeless. Not even when he couldn't remember the last time someone said her name. He just kept driving, kept searching, kept believing. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when everything changed. David was nearly 300 miles from home, passing through a small town he'd never heard of before, Wicklow, population just under 2,000. It was one of the many unplanned detours he made these days, traveling from tip to tip of every possible route that Blue Truck could have taken years ago. He wasn't following a lead this time, just a gut feeling, the same kind he'd followed 100 times before. The windshield wipers struggled against the downpour as he pulled into an old, rundown gas station on the edge of town. The sign above the roof flickered, half burned out, and the parking lot was mostly empty except for a few old sedans and a battered Jeep. David stepped inside the store, shaking water from his coat, and moved toward the coffee machine. His head was pounding. He hadn't slept properly in 2 days. As he poured the coffee, something outside the foggy window made his heart skip. A truck. A blue one. Faded, dented, aged. Parked beside the side wall of the gas station, partially hidden by a rack of propane tanks. It wasn't unusual, old trucks were common. But this one, something about it pulled at him. The color. The missing side mirror. The dent near the taillight. Details he knew by heart. He set the coffee down, forgotten, and stepped toward the window. The rain smeared the view, but he squinted through it. The plate was partially covered in mud, still unreadable, but the shape, the wear, the very presence of it matched perfectly. He didn't hesitate. David pushed open the door and rushed back to his car, keeping his head low beneath the rain. He waited, watched. His heart pounded against his chest like a war drum. Minutes passed. Then the store's front door opened. A man stepped out, middle-aged, scruffy, wearing a faded flannel shirt and a ball cap. He moved slowly, deliberately, carrying a small bag of groceries. And behind him, under the cover of the truck's hood, was a girl. David's breath caught in his throat. She looked about 13, maybe 14. Long dark hair, thin frame, wearing a large raincoat with the hood half up. He couldn't see her face clearly, but the way she moved, the hesitant steps, the way she turned her head slightly when the man looked at her, set off every alarm in David's soul. Then he saw it. The birthmark. Faint but unmistakable. Just below the girl's right ear. A tiny, crescent-shaped mark. Lily had had the same one. A doctor once told them it was harmless, common. But it wasn't common to David, it was sacred. It was his confirmation. His knees weakened, and he gripped the steering wheel to steady himself. It's her. It's her. The truck rumbled to life and began pulling out. David scrambled to start his car and pulled onto the road behind them, leaving the gas station behind. The truck didn't speed. It drove calmly, like it had a routine. David followed at a cautious distance, his mind spinning. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew what he had to do. With trembling fingers, he dialed 911. My name is David Bennett. My daughter was abducted 6 years ago. I just saw her. I'm following the vehicle now. Please, send help. This time, there would be no missed clues. No lost seconds. No regretful glances away. David wasn't letting her disappear again. David followed the blue truck along a winding 2-lane road that stretched beyond the edge of town. The rain had lightened to a mist, but the sky remained dull and overcast. He kept his headlights off and maintained enough distance to avoid suspicion, heart pounding with every turn. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel. He didn't blink. Couldn't. The truck drove without haste, as if its driver had no reason to worry, no idea that his years-long secret was finally unraveling. David could see the girl in the passenger seat more clearly now. Her hood had fallen slightly, revealing dark, shoulder-length hair. Her posture was hunched, closed in on itself, just like Lily's had been in her childhood photos when she was feeling nervous or scared. She wasn't looking at her surroundings. She was staring at her lap. After about 10 minutes, the truck turned down a gravel road flanked by trees. David slowed as he followed. The tires crunched over stones as the forest swallowed the path. At the end of the road sat a small, weather-worn trailer, partially hidden by overgrown brush. A broken swing set stood crookedly in the side yard, rusting. An old grill lay tipped over on the porch. The truck pulled up and parked. The man stepped out, stretched, and opened the passenger door. The girl hesitated. She didn't rush out like a carefree teen. She climbed down slowly, glancing around like someone who had learned to stay quiet and unseen. The way she moved told David everything. This was not a niece. This was not a family visit. This was a secret kept far too long. David parked behind a line of trees, heart thudding, and pulled out his phone again. He whispered into the receiver, "We're at a trailer off County Road 9. Please, she's here. My daughter's here." The dispatcher assured him officers were on the way. But minutes felt like hours. David didn't dare move closer. Instead, he watched from the shadows, afraid any noise might spook the man into disappearing with her again. The girl went inside. The man followed. The door creaked shut. For a moment, silence returned, except for the wind rattling the leaves and the blood roaring in David's ears. Then headlights appeared in the distance. Police cruisers, 2 of them. They approached slowly, without sirens, their tires muffled by the wet dirt. David stepped out from his car, waved frantically, and pointed toward the trailer. The officers wasted no time. With weapons drawn, they approached the door, knocking loudly. "Sheriff's Department. Open up." Inside, movement. A shadow passed by the window. The door opened slowly. The man stood there, squinting, trying to act confused. "What's going on?" he asked, voice low, guarded. "We have reason to believe a missing person is on this property," one officer said firmly. "Step outside and keep your hands where we can see them." The man complied, muttering, "She's my niece. We just moved here." One officer kept him in custody while the other entered the trailer. David held his breath. Then, a voice from inside, "I found her." The second officer stepped out gently, guiding the girl by the shoulder. She looked startled, unsure, but her eyes locked onto David across the yard. She stopped walking. David stepped forward, barely able to breathe. "Lily," he whispered. The girl stared at him, eyes wide. Then, after a long moment, she nodded, just once. "Daddy," she said. And just like that, 6 years of silence shattered. The words barely left her mouth, "Daddy," before David felt his legs give out. He dropped to his knees in the wet grass, overwhelmed by a rush of emotions too powerful to contain. Relief, shock, grief, joy, disbelief. For a split second, he couldn't speak. He could only stare at her, this young girl standing a few yards away. Soaked in rain, wrapped in an oversized sweatshirt, her face thinner, her eyes older, but unmistakably, his. The deputy gently guided her toward him. She walked slowly, cautiously, as if each step might shatter the fragile moment. When she finally reached him, David reached up with shaking hands and placed them on her shoulders. Tears welled in his eyes. "Lily," he whispered, voice cracking, "is it really you?" She nodded. Her lower lip trembled. "I didn't think you'd still be looking." "I never stopped," he said, his voice breaking completely. "I never will." For a few seconds, they just stood there, father and daughter in the middle of a gravel clearing, the world around them a blur. She leaned into him then, hesitant at first, then fully, hugging him for the first time in 6 years. He wrapped his arms around her tightly, protectively, as if letting go might make her disappear again. Behind them, the police were handcuffing the man who had claimed to be her uncle. He shouted protests, calling the situation a misunderstanding, claiming he had rescued her, that she had nowhere to go. But his words fell flat, ignored by the officers who had already begun to dig into his record. He had a history, multiple aliases, employment in remote areas, and previous charges for inappropriate behavior toward minors that had never gone to trial. Now, they had him, caught red-handed. Back at the sheriff's department, Lily sat quietly in a warm blanket, sipping hot cocoa someone had offered her. She didn't say much, but when she did, the truth poured out in fragments, sometimes rushed, sometimes whispered. She explained how the man had found her alone in that parking lot, told her her parents had abandoned her, that she had no home to return to. She was scared. She believed him. For years, she had moved with him from town to town, living in isolation. No school, no friends, just survival. The deputies recorded every word, hearts heavy. But what struck them most was Lily's clarity, her strength. She didn't break down. She didn't rage. She just told the truth, like someone who had waited too long to finally be believed. David was asked to provide a DNA sample, standard procedure. Though everyone knew she was his daughter, they needed confirmation. The test came back quickly. 99.999% match. Lily was home. The police called in CPS and a child trauma specialist to help ease Lily's re-entry. David never left her side. He held her hand during the interview. He waited outside during her medical exam. When she emerged from the room in a clean hoodie and jeans, she looked up at him shyly. "Do I still have a room?" she asked. David's voice cracked again. "It's exactly the same." Lily gave a small, crooked smile, the first smile he'd seen in over 2,000 days. They stepped out of the sheriff's office together, the night cool and silent, but this time, Lily wasn't vanishing into the dark. This time, she was coming home. The truth, when it finally unraveled, stunned even the most seasoned detectives. The man who had taken Lily Bennett, whose real name was revealed to be Howard Cray, had a long and disturbing history. He had never been on a national registry, but the deeper investigators dug, the more troubling his past became. He'd used multiple aliases over the years, drifting from state to state, always just under the radar. His pattern was consistent: find small, quiet towns, take cash-only jobs at auto shops, roadside motels, or on construction crews, and disappear again the moment anyone started asking questions. 6 years earlier, he had passed through Lily's town, living out of his truck for weeks while working odd jobs. The day he abducted her, he had been parked behind the ice cream shop for nearly an hour. Police believe he'd been watching, waiting for the right moment, when a child was momentarily alone, when there were no adults close enough to intervene. He approached Lily casually in the parking lot, police later confirmed through recovered camera footage and Lily's own account. She remembered him offering her a ride to catch up with her dad, who had forgotten something. At 7 years old, confused and trusting, she hesitated, but ultimately stepped into the passenger seat. That moment changed everything. Cray took backroads out of the county, abandoning his cell phone and ditching the plates from his truck within hours. In the first year, they moved 6 times. He dyed Lily's hair, called her by a new name, Anna, and told her over and over again that her family didn't want her anymore. That her father had given her away. He used lies like chains, wrapping her in a false reality built on fear and silence. She had no access to school, no social media, no visits to a doctor until absolutely necessary. Cray kept her isolated, often in rural cabins or run-down trailers, and convinced her that the outside world was dangerous. He taught her how to lie, how to hide. For a while, she believed it. But over time, cracks began to form. As she grew older, Lily started to question the man's stories. Why was there never mail in her name? Why didn't she go to school like kids on TV? Why did he change their address every few months? She kept her doubts to herself, afraid of the punishments that often followed her questions: shouting, locked doors, long silences. Still, she began to remember. Her real name, her room, her dad's voice. At night, she'd whisper his name into her pillow. And when Cray wasn't around, she wrote tiny notes to herself in a secret notebook, reminding herself of who she used to be: Lily. Not Anna. What she didn't know was that her father had been searching for her every day, carrying her photo in his wallet, following every cold lead and dead end, until fate intervened at that rainy gas station. Now, in custody, Cray showed little emotion. During interrogation, he claimed he had saved her from a broken home, that she was better off with him. When presented with the DNA evidence and Lily's testimony, he said nothing. Just stared at the wall. But the evidence was overwhelming: false documents, burner phones, disguises, surveillance journals. It was all there. He was charged with multiple federal crimes: kidnapping, child endangerment, false imprisonment, and child neglect. Prosecutors began assembling a case that would ensure he never walked free again. For Lily, the process of remembering everything was painful. But now, she had people who listened: officers, social workers, therapists, and most importantly, her father. Every time she sat down to talk, David was nearby, never rushing her, never pushing, just being present. And every time she spoke the truth, it set her a little bit freer. The man who stole her childhood had spent 6 years hiding her from the world. But now, with her name, her story, and her voice returned, Lily was no longer hidden. She was seen. She was heard. And justice had finally begun. The morning Lily returned home felt surreal, like waking up from a nightmare she had been trapped in for far too long. The skies were clear for the first time in days, the storm clouds that had haunted the last chapter of her life finally giving way to soft sunlight. As the police cruiser pulled into the familiar neighborhood, she sat quietly in the back seat, clutching a small duffel bag the sheriff's office had packed for her. It wasn't much, just a change of clothes, a journal, and a small stuffed bear someone had donated, but her grip on it was firm, like it was the only solid thing she understood right now. David stood outside the front door, barely holding it together. The front porch hadn't changed: same wind chime, same flower pots, same welcome mat. But the house felt different now. For 6 years it had been a museum of grief, a place filled with stillness and unanswered questions. Now, for the first time in what felt like forever, it was alive again, with hope. When Lily stepped out of the car, She hesitated at first, looking at the house like it was part of a dream. She was taller now, her face older, but her father recognized everything, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the slight inward curve of her feet when she stood still. He opened his arms, not rushing her, just waiting. She dropped the bag and ran to him. No words passed between them, just the sound of their breathing, the crushing weight of 6 lost years breaking apart in a single embrace. Inside the house, nothing had changed in her room. Her books were still stacked on the shelves. The drawings she'd made as a child still hung on the walls. Her favorite blanket still lay folded at the end of the bed. It was a room frozen in time, waiting for her. Lily walked around slowly, touching objects like they were relics from a past life. She picked up a snow globe on her nightstand and shook it gently. As the tiny white flakes danced inside, tears welled up in her eyes. "I thought I'd never see this again," she whispered. Her father watched from the doorway, fighting back tears of his own. "I kept everything," he said softly. "Just in case." In the days that followed, the house slowly transformed, not into the same home it had once been, but into something new. A place of healing. Lily met with counselors who specialized in trauma recovery. Her social worker helped ease her back into a normal routine, school assessments, therapy sessions, slow exposure to social environments. It wasn't easy. Some days she barely spoke. Others, she woke from nightmares, crying out in fear. But every time she reached out, David was there, steady, patient, present. The town rallied around her in quiet, meaningful ways. The local bakery sent over a box of her favorite cookies. The school offered to enroll her with gentle support and private tutoring. Neighbors left notes and gifts on the porch, many of them anonymously. They didn't want to overwhelm her, they just wanted her to know she was safe. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after her return, Lily asked her father, "Do you still have that photo of me from the fair?" He smiled and reached into his wallet. "Haven't gone a day without it." She held it delicately, studying her younger self, bright-eyed, carefree, holding a giant cotton candy stick with a goofy grin. "That girl is still in there," David said, tapping her chest lightly. "And she's stronger than ever." Lily didn't respond with words, just a small nod and a look that said she believed him. Or at least wanted to. That night, as she climbed into her bed, her real bed, in her real home, she pulled the stuffed giraffe from the shelf and hugged it close. She didn't say goodnight. She didn't have to. For the first time in years, the silence in her room wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Lily had come home, not just to a place, but to herself. The journey ahead would be long, but she had already taken the bravest steps. And this time, she wasn't walking it alone.